High noon in Thunder Canyon had never been quite so quiet. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen when cowboys, Apache warriors, and space pions faced off in the most unusual showdown the West had ever witnessed. Buck Martinez crouched behind an overturned wagon, watching through a gap as the space pions began their daily jerky-making rounds. The aliens moved with their usual mechanical precision, though he noticed their movements were slightly slower in the midday heat, steam occasionally venting from their metallic suits. "Everyone in position," he whispered. Young Hawk, hidden nearby, nodded. Around the perimeter of Wilson's pasture, Apache warriors lay in wait with their mirrors, while cowboys manned the newly christened skunkapult under One-Eyed Pete's nervous supervision. The captured skunks, secured in their specially designed launch sacks, were making their displeasure known with occasional toxic reminders of what was at stake. The only person not in position was, predictably, Jim Bob. The tobacco enthusiast had insisted on one final attempt at peaceful resolution before they launched their aromatic assault. He now stood in plain view of the space pions, attempting to demonstrate what he called his grand unified theory of tobacco appreciation. "Now you see," Jim Bob called out to the increasingly perplexed aliens, "if you combine the southern sweet leaf with just a pinch of Virginia fire-cured, you get a bouquet that'll remind you of your home planet, assuming you folks have tobacco up there." The space pions paused their jerky-making operation to watch Jim Bob's performance. Their antennae twitched in what might have been confusion or possibly mounting horror as he proceeded to demonstrate 7 different spitting techniques, including his famous double loop with a twist. "Should we stop him?" Kid Thompson whispered. "Nah," Buck replied. "He's actually providing a pretty good distraction. Besides, if this works, the space pions will probably avoid Earth forever just to make sure they never have to sit through another tobacco demonstration." Running Cloud, watching through his telescope from a nearby ridge, gave the signal. The sun had reached its peak, and the space pions' cooling systems were working overtime, venting steam in regular bursts. "Now," Buck hissed. The first wave of attack began with a synchronized flash of sunlight as 20 Apache warriors revealed their mirrors, catching the space pions in a dazzling crossfire of reflected rays. The aliens stumbled, their multiple eyes clearly overwhelmed by the sudden glare. Several of them bumped into each other, dropping partially processed pieces of jerky. "Pete," Buck called. "First shot." One-Eyed Pete, who had spent the morning calculating trajectories with the help of some remarkably patient Apache mathematicians, pulled the release lever on his contraption. The skunkapult creaked, groaned, and with a sound like a drunken blacksmith falling downstairs, launched its first payload. The special delivery arced gracefully through the air, sailing over the space pion's force field. Time seemed to slow as everyone watched the sack's trajectory, holding their breath, though whether from anticipation or preemptive self-defense was unclear. The bag landed directly between 3 space pions, splitting open on impact. The result exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. The space pions' reaction to the skunk spray was immediate and spectacular. Their antennae went rigid, their legs buckled, and their metallic suits began venting steam in quantities that suggested their environmental systems had encountered something they were absolutely not designed to handle. "Direct hit," Pete crowed. "Load the next one." The second launch was even more accurate than the first, creating a barrier of concentrated skunk essence that sent the aliens scrambling backward. The Apache warriors adjusted their mirrors to herd the disoriented space pions toward their ship, while the cowboys prepared for the third launch. And then Jim Bob, seizing what he presumably thought was his moment of glory, decided to improvise. "Wait!" he shouted, running toward the skunkapult with his arms full of tobacco pouches. "Let me add my special blend to the next shot. I've been saving my triple-fermented Thunderbolt Supreme for just such an occasion." "Jim Bob, no!" several voices shouted in unison. But it was too late. In his enthusiasm, Jim Bob tripped, sending his entire tobacco collection flying through the air. Pouches of every variety of tobacco he owned scattered across the battlefield, bursting open as they landed. A cloud of fine tobacco dust filled the air, mixing with the already potent skunk aroma to create something entirely new and indescribable. The space pions froze. Their antennae wiggled frantically, testing the air. Then, to everyone's astonishment, they began making a sound, a high-pitched, chirping noise that took a moment to recognize as alien laughter. "Well, I'll be damned," Buck muttered. "They think it's funny." The lead space pion approached Jim Bob, who was still sprawled in the dirt surrounded by empty tobacco pouches. It made a series of clicking sounds, then reached down with one of its claws. Everyone tensed, expecting Jim Bob to be turned into human jerky. Instead, the alien carefully picked up one of the intact pouches, examined it, and tucked it into a compartment in its suit. Then it turned to its companions and made a sharp whistling sound. The retreat began immediately. Space Pions scrambled back to their ship, moving surprisingly fast for creatures dodging patches of skunk spray while trying not to slip on scattered tobacco. They piled into their vessel with rather less dignity than they'd shown during their arrival, occasionally stopping to shake their claws at particularly potent clouds of the skunk tobacco mixture. "They're leaving?" Kid Thompson asked incredulously. "Just like that?" "Well," Running Cloud observed, "would you want to stay in a place where the locals fight with skunks and consider Jim Bob's tobacco habits normal?" The ship's engines fired up with a whine that sounded almost like a complaint. Green light pulsed around its base, and the vessel rose unsteadily into the air, trailing wisps of what might have been steam or possibly tobacco smoke. It shot into the sky at an angle that suggested its pilots were more concerned with speed than style, leaving behind only a faint green glow and the lingering aroma of their unconventional battle. For a moment, everyone stood in stunned silence, watching the ship disappear into the afternoon sky. Then Old Man Wilson spoke up. Did that alien steal Jim Bob's tobacco?" "Reckon so," Jim Bob said proudly. "Guess they developed a taste for it after all. That was my prize pouch too, aged in oak barrels for 3 years and everything." "You mean to tell me," Buck said slowly, "that after all our planning with the mirrors and the skunks and Pete's contraption, what finally drove them off was the threat of being exposed to more of your tobacco habits?" "Seems that way," Jim Bob beamed. "Though the skunks probably helped some." Running Cloud walked over to where the Space Pions had dropped some of their collected jerky. He picked up a piece, sniffed it, and took an experimental bite. "Not bad," he declared. "A little overdone perhaps, but the flavor is interesting." "Now hold on," Wilson protested. "That there's my cattle they made that from." "Consider it a fair trade," Running Cloud suggested. "They took some of our beef, we gave them some of Jim Bob's tobacco. I believe we got the better deal." As the adrenaline of battle faded, everyone became acutely aware of their current aromatic situation. The combination of multiple skunk attacks and Jim Bob's entire tobacco collection had created something that would likely linger in the territory's collective memory and nostrils for generations to come. "Reckon we ought to build a monument," Jim Bob mused, looking around at the aftermath. "Something to commemorate our victory. Maybe a big statue of a skunk holding a tobacco pouch." "Jim Bob," Buck interrupted, "if you say one more word about tobacco, I'm going to let Old Man Wilson use that alien jerky ray they dropped on you." The celebration that followed was held strictly outdoors, with everyone maintaining a respectful distance from the most directly involved participants. The Apache and Cowboys shared a feast, swapped stories about their various roles in the battle, and unanimously agreed that some details, particularly anything involving Jim Bob's tobacco theory, should perhaps be left out of the official account. As the sun set on Thunder Canyon, Buck and Running Cloud stood watching the stars, each holding a piece of Space Pion jerky. "You know," Buck said, "I've been thinking, maybe we ought to make this a regular thing. The alien battles. Know this." Buck gestured to where Cowboys and Apache warriors were teaching each other their respective victory dances, all while staying carefully upwind of Jim Bob. "This working together business. Seems to me if we can fight off space scorpions, we might be able to handle just about anything." Running Cloud nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Though next time, maybe we leave Jim Bob's tobacco out of the strategy session." "Agreed. Though I can't help but wonder about that pouch they took with them." Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, aboard a ship that would definitely need extensive decontamination, a group of Space Pions were probably discovering that humans weren't the only ones who could develop unusual taste in tobacco. And if, in the years that followed, Jim Bob occasionally received mysterious packages of what he claimed was space tobacco, well, that was just another detail that never made it into the official story. After all, some things are better left as mysteries. Especially when they smell like that.